be off screen for the first part so I can share it to our live stream?
All right, it's live on Facebook right now, Andy.
Okay, I'll take care of that, and I'll come on shortly. So if you want to start with Dad, and then I'll join in.
I do, and before we get going, Fred, I just want to tell everyone, welcome to our 10th shelter-in-place wine event. This, to me, when I saw on the calendar about 5 weeks ago, was the event I was looking forward to as a child looks forward to Christmas, because the Schweiger family, the Schweiger family is the quintessential family winemaking operation in all of wine country. And we're going to talk with Fred and his son, Andy, in a minute. But I want to welcome everybody both on Zoom and on Facebook. Cellar Angels got started 10 years ago, basically on the heels of the last great catastrophe in the economic meltdown. And we wanted to try to help the small individual family wineries in Napa and Sonoma. And interestingly enough, there's a parallel with the winery we're featuring tonight in the Schweiger family. And Fred will talk a little bit about that. But the wine that we're going to be talking about tonight, in addition to the entire portfolio, is the 2013 Cabernet Sauvignon. And one of the things that we'll discuss is why mountain fruit is just spectacularly brilliant in showcasing certain aspects of varietals. And I want to jump right in and again, welcome Facebook folks, welcome Zoom folks. Really appreciate it. Barb Randall, hello. Thank you for jumping on. I am with Fred Shweiger, who is probably one of the hardest working individuals I've met, and who, rumor has it, has never met a tractor he doesn't like.
We make it work.
I was going to say, or doesn't think he can't rebuild it. And he is sitting,
That's right.
He is sitting, actually, if you look at my backdrop, we're on the same patio. We're just separated by about 1,800 miles, and I'd rather be where he is than where I am. But his is a very, very special property. And some of you I know, Jeff and Jane Greasy, good evening. Jeff, this is someplace that you and Jane absolutely have to go to if you haven't been. And this is a special, special place. And I don't want to get metaphysical, but in addition to its natural surroundings and natural just sheer beauty, it's special because of the people that are there. And it stuck with me 13 years ago when I first met this family. And then when I first visited in 2009, and Fred said these words, which I'm sure he has said numerous times before, in that we want to have you receive the experience of a lifetime every time you visit. Now, that's a high bar, so to speak, to measure up to. And this is a place that it's just got a natural landscape. You have a father and son team, and we're going to get into it. Andy has sat down. He's got all the technology done. It's just a regular day at the office for these two. And I'm going to raise a glass to you both, and thanks for having us on. So cheers to each of you.
Thank you.
How is everyone? How are the Schweigers?
Well, we're great. You know, this is an interesting year with the warm February, and we're lacking in rain. And we just had 2 inches of rain a couple of days ago, which made everything really wet and muddy. And we still have to spray every 14 to 21 days, depending on, because of botrytis and mildew. And so that's what I was doing all day today. Andy helped me first time all year. We hooked the sprayer up. We got everything together, and we sprayed about 8 acres. And tomorrow I'll do another 8, and then it's going to rain again about 3 more inches here. So it's working, kind of working against the clock. But you know, it wouldn't be our first rodeo that we've had challenges, and the tractor really didn't like to go where I wanted it to go today, but we made it work. And something, Andy, I have to pass on to you: when you're going down some of those hills, don't hit the brakes. You want to let your compression slow you down. You hit the brakes, you'll go down there like a coaster. So we got a lot done today, and so that was my office for today. If I seem tired, that's true, I am.
It's kind of like
I'm having a little bit of it.
You know, it's kind of like going downhill in a stick shift car. You don't need to use the brakes, you just downshift.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Exactly right. But you got 200 gallons of material you're spraying, pushing you downhill though.
Yeah.
And it'll go wherever it wants to go. But by and large,
go ahead. Well, some people don't know the history of the property, and I'm blessed to know each of you, your daughter. I'm blessed to know Fred, your bride. How's Sally doing?
Doing well. Thank you for asking. Yeah,
Good.
she's great. You know, she's still part of the business, very much so. And it's really great to have the family, and our daughter comes by. She's on our board, and it all still is in a good place. And even though, you know, we've had this shelter in place, sales have been, you know, thank goodness for our wine club and our wonderful folks who are out there, you know, supporting and buying. More people are drinking wine these days. And that's a good thing. So there's always some good that follows the bad. And, you know, and we're hopefully just really on the cusp of getting available to be open here pretty soon. But we'll see, you know, it's all about, we just have to use common sense and be careful.
Absolutely. And Liz and Nelson from Michigan, happy Friday, welcome. And I think the story to me, and like you just said, Fred, you know, this isn't your first rodeo. And the founding of the property, and I mean, you bought it in the 60s. You got a screaming deal, I think, of $250+ an acre. And
whoa, I had to work real hard for that. Okay, I'm kidding. Tell the story. Okay.
No, because I think it's interesting where we find ourselves today, where you've got this pandemic, which is disrupting just about everything. And was it the 1982, 1983 savings and loan crisis where you were a general contractor and there was no work and you decided I'm going to clear this land and we're going to plant grapes?
Yeah, there was a recession in '79 that just shut down all construction. And it was a big time recession that lasted, you know, 6 months, 8 years, 6 months or a year. But the trick was interest rates were 21%. Nobody will be building at that price point. So I had two jobs that both the banks pulled the loan, even though I signed contract. And they said, no, we just can't, these people can't afford that kind of interest on $1 million project. Okay, so I had 4 really good carpenters. I said, hey guys, you want to help me cut down trees? I'll pay you better than unemployment. I went home that night and explained to Sally why I thought it was a good idea to plant a vineyard on property that I bought in 1961. You know,
Just 2 or 3 acres until the next job comes along. It'll be a hobby, he said.
yeah,
35 acres later, the next job came along.
you know, and you're on a bulldozer, you just keep on going. You don't
Well,
stop.
It's funny you talk about clearing the land, and I'm going to put up a picture now of 1961 and you guys clearing land. It's from your website, so you're probably familiar with the picture. It looks like you've got about a 36-inch tree on a splitter. And having grown up on a farm, I'm quite familiar with taking trees down with a chainsaw and splitting, but clearing land and clearing stumps, that I am not at all familiar with. So how on earth did you clear this acreage and the stumps?
Well,
That's a picture of you and Grandpa next to each other.
okay, is that a picture where some little child is sticking his head into the cut?
No, that's the big round on the log splitter, and you're shirtless.
Oh, okay. Well, that's my father. In there.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, we worked together a lot. He was my best friend. But no, it was one of those things where we just had to say, hey, persevere. You know, we think we can do this. I had already done soil samples for vinifera grapes. Soil samples like a pH of 5.8, just slightly acidic. And that's exactly what the soil acid was. And I did that in the early 70s. But, you know, to make things happen in life, you need 3 basic things: time, ambition, and money. Well, I always had ambition, but I didn't have time, and obviously I'd never had any money. So all at once, now I've got time. So how about if we can try to make this work? And that's where it started. Our first harvest was in 1984. And as we developed the vineyard, Andy and our daughter were out there as little people helping me put up drip hose, and it was a family affair. Well, compared to today, yes. Well, and so
you got to take free labor when you can get it.
Well, now wait a minute. In the wintertime, it was, okay, our philosophy is work hard, play hard. We'd be on the slope skiing downhill and, you know, eating well, and it was a fun venture that we could do recreation together, and then we could work together. And it was a work ethic that both our children picked up, and they loved their job. And then Andy went on to the University of California, Davis, and then he decided to major in fermentation science. And when he graduated, I said, congratulations. Now you screw up somebody else's wine for a while.
That's his side of the story. My story was when they wanted me to come make wine, I was like, yeah, I was thinking about around 2000, 2005, not 1994.
How old were you in 94?
24.
All right. So, I mean, obviously you grew up around the business and you've been walking these vineyards since you were knee high. And I mean, you're in Napa Valley, you're right outside St. Helena. And actually, I'm going to have Denise share a picture of the property because you're at 2,000 feet elevation and we actually haven't told people where you are located. You're on top of Spring Mountain. You're above the fog line. You have just an absolutely spectacular piece of property that is terraced, that is extremely difficult to basically work with the equipment. And you've had to retrofit a lot of the equipment yourselves. And we are showing a wonderful picture of all of the terracing that you've put in place. And now 40 years later, it's fantastic. But Fred, you first, was there a vision for this that you decided, okay, the savings and loan, we're going to make a vineyard? And then was that going to be, as Andy said, a 2 or 3 year hobby? And then you decided, hey, we can do this full time? Or was this part of the master plan?
Well, there really wasn't a master plan. We didn't. I mean, quite frankly, it's probably the dumbest business model you could ever think of. When you think about it, you never get a Harvard MBA out of this thing. You are clearing the land, spending a bunch of money, and you are denied a loan from the only people that loan to agriculture today. It's agricultural ag credit production, and they refused my loan the first time out of it. And so I needed to borrow $500,000 to put out all the trellis system, buy the plants, and I already bought a contract to buy the plants, and there's a whole bunch of labor to pay. Well, they denied it. They said, well, you can reapply in 60 days. I reapplied in 60 days and got turned down again. I thought, well, wait a minute. This is not going to work. Banks wouldn't touch you. And so then I applied another 60 days right at the edge. And they said, no, you know what? We're going to loan it to you because you're so damn persistent. We think you'll make a go of it. Even though our debt to equity ratio was really great, it didn't matter then. Today, it's huge. And who would have thought, But right. It just kind of really grew nicely. And, where we are, the soils are fantastic. We've got these volcanic soils that just give these incredible flavors to the fruit. At our elevation, our soils give us a we'll call it terroir, soils, microclimate, and all that we do to take care of the plants. I mean, I got 22,000 grapevines, and as I'm spraying today, I'm looking at every one of them, and my goodness, I think the mailbag is it's out of control.
Well, hold that thought, and I want to come back to Andy for a second. So you're in your 20s, and you decide to actually be involved in this business. Was it something when you were growing up as a teen that you loved, that you had aspirations to do this? Did you like the science part of it? Did you like the art part of it? Or was it all of it or none of it?
Yes. I grew up, everything from planting vines to learning how to prune to, the first time I ever played softball on a team with my wife, she was embarrassed the way I threw a ball. And that's because I spent more of my younger years, teen years, with a chainsaw than playing baseball or softball. And I remember riding in one of the trucks delivering fruit to ZD Wines and seeing what they were doing in the winery and said, wow, that looks like a lot more fun than being out in the sun and the dust all day. So Robert Deleurs, the winemaker at ZD, was hiring everybody for his bottling line. And he was paying a lot of people under 18. He was paying them in cash. The statute of limitations expired. So we were...
We're in the cone of silence.
Yeah. At or below minimum wage, but it was a great job. It was a great experience. And halfway through bottling season, he noticed that I was always the first person there and was always trying to figure out how the machines operated. So he offered if I wanted to come in 2 hours earlier than everybody else to help him set up and sanitize and get the line ready. Well, long story short, by the last 2 or 3 weeks, he said, hey, Andy, you've got this. Do you want to come in and set up the line? And I can sleep in a little bit. So let's get the end of bottling season. end of the season, he said, everybody did a great job. Thank you very much. Here's a $100 bonus for staying from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. Would love for you to all come back next year. Andy, stay for a couple of minutes. So everybody else leaves, and he said, Andy, I am not hiring you back next year. So what did I do wrong? And he said, well, you did such a good job. You need to keep learning from other people. And I said, yes, but to work with wine, I need to be over 18 to get a work permit. And he said, well, no problem. Here is my son's ID. He's 19 and you look enough like him. And I wrote you a letter of recommendation as if you were a sophomore at Santa Rosa Junior College, not Montgomery High School.
And who among us,
So,
let he who among us has never used a fake ID cast the first stone.
yes, but a fake ID to not be 21, to be under 21, and not for the purpose of drinking, but to get employment. So while I was in high school, I got to work at Gloria Ferrer and was on the night shift, and you got one night off. And I would often refuse my one night off in the week because there was always another opportunity to learn. There was one night everybody got sent home because the membrane had ruptured inside the press. And Gloria Ferrer at that time only had one press. And so they were dead in the water until the press could be repaired. And the winemaker was staying behind to repair the press. Everybody else got to go home. And they said, we need one volunteer to stay and fix the press. And I was like, that sounds like a lot of fun. Now this press, for those of you who've never seen a membrane press, picture a large horizontal cylinder and the membrane is mounted in the middle. And when it's under vacuum, it sucks to one side, and when you fill it with the fruit, and when you pressurize it, it inflates until it fills the entire cylinder, squeezing all the fruit and getting all the juice out. So there's a hole in it, so they couldn't inflate it, and even worse, you're getting juice in the backside. This press our press is probably a 4-foot diameter. Yeah. For comparison, and our press is probably 8 feet long. This press and so our press holds about 4 ton of uncrushed fruit. This press was a 10-foot diameter and about 30 feet long. So you could actually stand up inside of it. And to change the membrane on ours, you bolt from the outside. This one, there's actually a port. There was an 18-inch port, and you undid about 20 bolts, and then you climbed in through the backside. And so you're working inside this port. And so
let me back up. Let me back up 1 second. This was at Gloria Ferrer?
Yes.
And you are 18 and a half?
Legally, I was 17 at the time. And so the winemaker showed me how to unbolt the port. And so I was working with the wrench unbolting the port while he was having a cigarette. And then we climbed in, and he gave me a socket, and he took a socket, and we just started working our way around because you had to pull about 300 bolts to take the old membrane out and then shove the membrane out through the back and then put the replacement one in and start bolting it in. And I was just so thrilled that I got to work side by side with the winemaker. I didn't complain about the fact that he kept smoking the cigarette inside the backside of the press.
And that's where the smoky flavor of some of the wines comes from.
Well, it was the back. Keep in mind, this is the backside of the press, so this never.
I'm teasing. Let me.
I asked him. I said, "Isn't this going to affect the fruit?" He goes, "No, this is actually the exhaust side. It doesn't matter."
Well, that's a good
you want
point.
a cigarette? I'm like, no, sir.
Let me. A couple of folks have said hello. Carrie Randall, now Carrie Schuster. I know. She says hello, Fred. You treated her and her sisters when they were at the property. Bill Best says hello. The Mannings, Sean and Marilyn Manning, have been to the property several times, and they say hello as well, and they absolutely applaud the lack of money and the doubling down of grit, which seems to have been the modus operandi in the early days. And also Nick Schramm, I understand the stoneless comment, so duly noted. So the first vintage was 83, and you grew, what grapes did you decide to plant during that time frame?
Well, how do you know what to plant in an area? And that's a huge decision. I learned a whole lot from older farmer guys who've been on the mountain for 50, 60 years farming. And an old timer, Herman Hummel, came by one day and said, Fred, he was a buddy of my dad. What are you going to plant? And actually, the University of California, Davis suggested Sauvignon Blanc. Well, that would have been a mistake. It was too hot up here. So Herman says, you plant the king and queen of grapes on Spring Mountain, you'll never go wrong. But take it easy on the queen, because someday you'll lose it all. I said, whoa, can you be a little more specific, please? Yeah, you plant the king, that would be Cabernet Sauvignon, clone 7 on a St. George rootstock. And then he described the same thing for Chardonnay. He says, but go easy on the Chardonnay. So we only planted 8 acres of Chardonnay, and he was quite right. After 15 years, we lost all the Chardonnay to a disease called Pierce's disease, for which today we still don't have a cure for. So we replanted back 4 acres to Chardonnay, and then over time we've changed all that. And people say, wait, what are you doing with Chardonnay on Spring Mountain? You're in red grape country. Why don't you just stick with Cabernet? The difference in price per ton is, about $10,000, $12,000 a ton. Well, my wife likes Chardonnay, so that's the rest of the story.
Case closed.
But eventually,
well, and interesting. And go ahead.
Well, eventually, 4 of those acres of Chardonnay got planted over to Merlot.
Yes.
Well, and the irony is that I first learned of you, Fred, via the Chardonnay.
Yeah.
So
okay.
It was kind of a funny story, because when we owned the wine store in Chicago, a distributor came in and poured your Chardonnay, and I said, this is not a Napa Chardonnay. I'm sorry. And it's certainly, what do you mean? Just to your exact reaction a minute ago, I'm like, you're telling me this is a Spring Mountain Chardonnay? And then so the distributor left, and I was so impressed with the bottle that I called the number on the back of the bottle, and Diana happened to pick up the phone and answer. And I said, I need to learn more about you, your winery, and this Chardonnay. So it was, I'm glad he told you to go easy on the queen, and that you still have a mountaintop Chardonnay, because it is absolutely spectacular.
And it's Chardonnay, Spring Mountain District Chardonnay is so unique. And just like you said, we have made so many friends who've discovered us from the Chardonnay, not knowing that we're best known for Cabernet. But there's only 2 other wineries producing 100% Spring Mountain District Chardonnay, and that would be Keenan and Smith Madrone. There's a few other growing a few plants here and there, but they blend it with Carneros or Alexander Valley fruit. And I like to point this out because our terroir gives such a unique flinty minerality and a white peach component to it that you typically do not see in typical California or Napa Valley Chardonnay. It's more your classic Merceau Burgundian style of fruit.
And it doesn't go through a second. It doesn't go through a secondary fermentation, because we don't like oak buttery and we don't like oaky.
No,
it's all about the fruit.
And Andy, I'm going to get into a second year winemaking style in a minute, but I'm first going to launch our first interactive poll question to see if our audience has been paying attention. And so over on Facebook, you're going to also get a poll. So at 2,000 feet, Schweiger Vineyards rests above the fog line. This allows the grapes sun exposure and a longer period of ripening. True or false? And Schweigers, you don't answer.
Oh.
We're going to give this poll 15 more seconds. Go ahead, Andy.
No, the other thing about being above the fog line, you get into the later summer months, the essential time of ripening, and it will be fogged in the valley floor. But more importantly than that is you'll sometimes hear winery reps talk about the diurnal shift, which is a really scientific, fancy sounding word to say that it gets cool at night and gets warm in the day. Wow. But up here in the slopes of the east and west of Napa Valley, and I think it's more extreme the further north you go in the valley, up in the hills, is what I like to call, if that's the diurnal shift, I like to call it the quadernal shift. Because, oversimplifying, our night times are warmer than the valley floor. Our daytime highs are cooler than the valley floor. But what's really fun is that at the peak of the heat of the day, at the hottest point of summer, say around 2 o'clock, let's say it hits 95 degrees here, it's probably 98 down in the town of Calistoga, in the town of St. Helena, and probably 100 up in Calistoga. It'll start to cool down a little bit about 4 or 5 o'clock, maybe at 3, 4, 5 degrees. And then right around 7 o'clock, the temperature will jump up again and almost be as hot as it was at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And that's because you've got all the cool air coming in the San Francisco Bay. You've got the fog coming in from the south end of the valley, and that fog is coming in. Well, the heat has to go somewhere, and it goes north and it goes up the slopes of the mountains.
Well,
Now, I like to point that out because so our nights are warmer, and your phenol development in the skins needs to occur above 68 degrees Fahrenheit in the absence of UV radiation. So our vines rarely drop below 75 degrees at night. So the vines are constantly producing phenols, which give us the dark colors, the bright aromas that is not happening in the valley floor. So you combine that with moderate water stress, moderate nutrient stress, resulting in smaller berries, we get much more intensely flavored, much more aromatic fruit than you get in the valley floor.
Well, and you bring up a good point with regards to the complexity of the fruit, but certainly the elevation and what you just described with regards to the wind shifts. Was there anything, a question that's just come up from Jeff and Jane, what changes do you make to how you make your Chardonnay given both the altitude and anything that you might encounter with regards to the different ripening times because of the altitude? Is there anything you have to change?
Well, the white peach component I mentioned is a waiting game. And what's interesting is that in any given vintage, our Chardonnay might be the highest alcohol wine. We've had some vintages where the Chardonnay was a higher alcohol than the Cabernet. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I have had wines that test out as high alcohol that don't taste alcoholic. I have had wines that test out at 12.5 or 12% alcohol that smell hot and alcoholic. It's all about the balance and the structuring in the wine. And our style with Chardonnay has slowly evolved. Our first several vintages, we did not have access to a filter, and so we were bottling them unfiltered. And so to make them more microbially stable, one reason you would go through a malolactic fermentation is to consume nutrients by a microorganism that you know what it's going to do in the wine. And so it makes the wine less hospitable to spoilage microbes. So by going through malolactic, we wound up with a more stable wine to bottle unfiltered. However, that buttery silkiness took away from the bright white peach. It took away that bright Granny Smith apple. And also bottling unfiltered, although unfiltered sounds exciting and more natural.
Sexy. Yeah.
The reality is most American consumers do not like cloudy products. They like things to be clear and they like things to be brilliant. I think where the problem comes in filtration is that you have a less experienced cellar worker who gets a work order and is told to filter a tank, and they go and filter the tank. A lot can go wrong in filtration. Filtration can also make the wine even more brilliant when done with experience and care.
Sure.
And so one thing that makes us unique, there's not a lot of winemakers who are actually in their cellar making sure the filtration is going, not even just supervising, but actually doing the filtration. Same comes for press. I am constantly by the press because so much can go right, so much can go wrong. So,
well, that's,
we're all in, elbows deep in the grapes.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that I've been impressed with since day one, 13 years ago. You do everything there, and which reminds me, and Fred, you can't answer this next question either. So this is a winemaking history question from the family, and the question says, for Fred Shweiger, not to answer before the results are published, To help Andy get skilled at winemaking, you A, introduced him to famous mentors in the Valley at a young age, B, enrolled him in classes at Davis with a sink or swim directive, C, encouraged him to go cut his teeth and ruin someone else's crop first, or D, asked Sally to talk to the boy and encourage a winemaking interest.
Oh, good question. That's great.
Okay, so we're going to give that. By the way, on the first question, we had 83% right answers on true with regards to the elevation. So it definitely allows for a different ripening, longer extended period of time. And Andy went into some detail on that, so that's good. I'm going to give this next question 5 seconds to see 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, the answer, interestingly enough, we had, the answer is, of course, you encouraged him to go cut his teeth and maybe practice on someone else's crop. Maybe I shouldn't have said room. But we had but we had a number of people that actually said the other classes, or introduced them to famous mentors. And that actually leads me to Andy. You know, you have exposure there to obviously some of the greats in the industry. What was your inspiration for the type of wines you wanted to make? And I'll draw an analogy to your saxophone playing. So when someone has an interest in something, it's usually because someone at a very, very high level, they watched them, they saw them, they're like, holy cow, I wanna shoot like Michael Jordan. I wanna play saxophone like so-and-so. I wanna play guitar like Eric Clapton. Who was your inspiration in winemaking, and what did you try to take from those individuals?
I think my big, that dog is barking in the wind.
That's okay, this is live.
I think my big aha moment in wine was around 1991. There was a passport event on Spring Mountain. So we were just growers back then, and the various Spring Mountain District wineries, so there was no Spring Mountain District back then, but the various Spring Mountain wineries did a passport where you could go from one winery to the next. And it was the first time I had Streblo Cabernet. And most of the mountain wineries were still following the guideline that you pick at 23.5 degrees Brix, because that's what the refractometer told you to, and that's what everybody did. And the Cabernets of Spring Mountain, I am speculating that would have then been an 1988 Cabernet from Streblo. And most hillside Napa wines back at that time had a very bright bell pepper note to them that was very unpleasant to a lot of people and very high in tannins.
No, you can't see me, but I'm actually curling my nose because when I hear that in a Cabernet, I get a little bit concerned.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And they would have very tight, aggressive tannins, and they weren't helped because people were using a lot of American oak back then because it was more affordable. They didn't understand vanillin production. They didn't understand tyloses and how air can interact, and American oak being a lot tighter does nothing to help wines age in barrel. The Streblo Cabernet did not have any of that vegetativeness. It was actually allowed to ripen. They did not care about the alcohol going over 14%. They didn't care if they had to pay more in excise taxes. They wanted to produce the best fruit they could. And they were producing wines of elegant structure. They were rounder. They were more structured, as opposed to a lot more of the sledgehammer fruit and tannin with bell pepper.
And so did you know, obviously, the Streblo winemaker?
I actually didn't know him, and I never really got to talk with him much back at the time, but that was kind of what my earlier pursuits were when we started making wine here, was, okay, just because everybody else wants us to pick at 23.5 doesn't mean we need to pick at 23.5. Now, in the earlier years, we were still contracted to other wineries, so we had some vintages that we were picking under their guidelines, but over time we started to harvest when we decided it was time to harvest for us.
And Fred, what about you? Was there any type of life on the farm? Very familiar with it. Fred, was there?
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm waiting for that dog to come back with a dead road in their mouth.
Hey, guys. Hey, settle down.
No, it's the wind blowing through the trees getting them excited.
Squirrel.
And Andy, as it relates to saxophone, was there any type of sax player that was your inspiration?
You know, I'd say my big moment was when I was accepted to the Stanford Jazz Workshop the summer that Stan Getz was the artist in residence. And so they broke us up into small combos. And we had one person who would come by, would work with us and mentor us and help us with our arrangements. And then the artist in residence would come by and listen to you, especially when you were doing performances out in public. And I was the only sax player in my combo, so Stan kind of took all the sax players under his shoulder. I was 19 when I got to do this, and the last night was a open mic jam session at a bar near the Stanford University, and they kind of turned a blind eye to those of us coming in as long as we didn't sit at the bar.
You had a fake ID, though.
Yeah, by that time that fake ID worked to be 21, and Stan saw me across the room and motioned me to come sit next to him at the bar and bought me a beer. And we're just chatting for a while. And he was complimenting me and giving me some constructive criticism. And all of a sudden, his face turned sour as this noodling soprano saxophone starts up on stage. And Stan turns, glares, and throws his beer at the sax player on the stage and says, "Kenny, you suck. And what kind of last name is G anyway? Get off the stage."
Wow.
And then he walked across the room, turned and said, "Schweiger, you're with me." And because we all had our instruments there. And so he, I think it was an A, but he just, Rufus Reed was on upright bass. I forget who our drummer was. And he said, "Okay, we're going to play Stolen Moments," and just counted off, even as I was just hooking my horn up to my neck strap. And getting to play a duet on stage with Stan Getz moments after he kicked Kenny G off stage. Yeah, that sticks with you.
That actually, yeah, that could leave an impression. So Fred, we interview a ton of winemakers, and many of them are like yourself. They have children that could potentially be in the industry and could potentially take over the reins of the establishment. What words of wisdom, encouragement, or panic would you like to offer them with regards to how to have family in the business?
Don't screw it up.
Don't screw it up. Well, that's what I tell Andy, hey, these are, well, let me back up a little bit. You know what? It's all about leading by example. You set the pace, you set the level of, Andy understands that I'm pretty much a 100% guy, but I'll settle for 99 if we have to, but not very much, not very often. And that's how we proceed with our, growing our grapes and how we do everything we do here. So it just sort of leading by that kind of, you want to show that I wouldn't ask anybody to do anything I wouldn't want to do or haven't done. And everything from, hey, let's clean that tractor up or take it apart and let's put it back together, or hey, let's have some fun too. So I think someone that can work alongside you like Andy has, and this morning we were hooking up the sprayer, there's always a few little glitches, and oh my gosh, and why isn't that working quite the way you'd like to? And you think through it, you make it work. It's all about having, you want to love to have a success of what you're doing.
Sure. And then I want to jump into the 2013 Cab in 1 second, but talk me through case production right now for the entire portfolio, where you are, where you want to be, and a couple, like a 1 and 3 year vision.
3-year vision? Well, where we are, so with the exception of our Sauvignon Blanc, everything we do is estate bottled, and that's very rare, becoming much more rare in the Napa Valley right now, because most people are buying fruit, letting other people do the growing for them. So we grow enough fruit that in a given vintage we could do about 8,000 cases a year, but we're only doing about 5,000 cases.
Okay.
we don't want the brand to get too big too fast. And sometimes you sell wine in the bulk market because it didn't turn out quite how you wanted it to. It didn't, as Dad said earlier, it was 99% when it could have been 100%. And it's nobody's fault usually. It's just nature kind of didn't like us that day. That being said, every year it gets harder and harder to sell these wines in the bulk market because as we become better growers, as we become better winemakers, we're making better wine. So the nice thing is, the main reason we're selling in the bulk market, we don't want the brand to get too big too fast and have to do business with the Costco's and the Trader Joe's. I often tell my distributors that you will not sell our wine into Total Wine because I would rather sell 10% of the volume of wine to 10 independently owned mom and pop wine shops than one Total Wine where it's going to sit on a shelf at room temperature next to 1,000 other wines. I want us to be in places where they know us, they know our story, they're going to hand sell it. So as we gain, it takes a long time to build a brand. And as we gain our reputation, then we have the capacity to expand up to 8,000 cases without any change in our quality.
And do both of you feel, and Fred, I'll ask you first, since your name is on the bottle and it's not called Flagship Cabernet or just some sort of, crazy name, but your name is on the bottle, does that add a heightened sense of pressure that you probably put on yourself to say that 100%, this has to be fantastic?
No, not pressure. If you're proud of what you do, put your name on it. Unless, and if you have no intention of ever selling your winery, you put your name on it. It's easy to sell a ABC winery because your name's not there. And who knows, how it gets taken over. And, as you look at the overall marketplace today, you get these, you got the big boys buying the little guys, and it'll be interesting with this economy, how all this shakes out. No pressure here. It's just, we're proud of what we do. We'll adjust to, continually making quality wine, even if we don't produce as much. But we just have to, pardon me, our dogs are going silly here.
Okay.
Can you see these dogs?
It's the witching hour. They're getting a little.
They're awesome. Their bowl is empty. What are the names of the dogs?
The golden retriever is Jenny and the yellow lab is Nikki.
Awesome. And by the way, all the attendees that are on, when you go to Schweiger and you stop in, and it's tasting by appointment, but the dogs are there. This isn't just for effects with the film tonight. They're there. They will greet you. I promise you.
Yeah, they're there. They'll look like they haven't been fed in weeks and would like a snack. But no, they're just happy dogs that love to greet. Well, it's been kind of interesting, particularly Nikki, because Jenny goes home and has, the kids, Andy's daughter and son, to play with. But Nikki, she's out here greeting everybody all the time, and she'll sit around, hang around the winery. Where's everybody? So it's kind of a kick. We need to get a little email thing going out. Hey, with a little Nikki smiling. Where's everybody? But this will soon change.
No, the dogs are awesome, and they are a lot. Trust me, where Andy and Fred are sitting, and where I am sitting, that is the patio at Schweiger, and that is your view. It is absolutely spectacular, and you will not want to leave. The hospitality is tremendous, and if you happen to be sipping on the 2013 Cabernet Sauvignon like you are at home, Andy, why don't you walk us through this wine real quick and talk to me about your philosophy on Cabernet Sauvignon, mountain fruit. Our customers know very well that the vines have to go down, 20, 25, 30 feet oftentimes to struggle, and that intensity comes through the clusters. But if you remember 2013, kind of walk them through what they should be tasting, and then also what you've seen over the years from a food standpoint that pairs magnificently.
Well, so 2013 was, first off, I do not like the concept of good vintages, bad vintages so much because in the Napa Valley, we have a much more temperate climate. The whole concept of good vintages, bad vintages, vintages to avoid really starts with Bordeaux, where a typical Bordelais vintage, they will have rain and hail 2 or 3 times during harvest. To Napa growers, that would be a disaster. We'd call our crop insurance and give up. A disastrous vintage in Bordeaux, a declassified vintage in Bordeaux, is something the likes of which the Napa Valley has never even seen. I mean, I even think back the '89 harvest when I was at Joseph Phelps, the cellar crew never got out of our rain suits. It was raining almost the entire vintage.
Yeah.
And 98 was very cool. We still got through 98. I mean, so in 2011 was a challenging vintage, but I think good farmers and good winemakers can still create good wines in challenging vintages. And I emphasize challenging vintages because a lot of wine writers, they're in the business of selling magazines or selling ad space on their blog. And so they need to make headlines. They need to say negative things to get people excited and buy their issue of the magazine. And I don't want to say there's no such thing as a bad vintage, but we have challenging vintages. And 2013, so that being said, 2013 was a picture perfect vintage of moderate nights, moderate temperatures, nothing too hot that I can recall. As for the winemaking, one thing that I do that's very different with our wines is that we're actually barrel aging just shy of 3 years. Many Napa Valley wineries are already selling their 2017 Cabernets. We just bottled ours last week. I just finished loading the last truck today, and they're on their way down to the warehouse, and they're going to be sitting there the next 2 to 3 years. We're taking our time to release our wines because we want to be more food friendly, more approachable upon release. And that's because we're a winery run by a grape grower and a winemaker, not a CFO or a bean counter.
And you're right. It's funny. I share and echo your sentiments on challenging vintages, and our customers at Cellar Angels know, while the media or the press may have maligned the 2011 vintage, there was great wines made in 2011, and you just have to know where they are and have someone that is a wine guy or gal that can do that. 2013, you're right. It was a picture perfect vintage, but I'd like you each to kind of tell me in your own words, and it may be the same thing, but I'd be curious what you think is the most special attribute of mountain fruit as opposed to valley floor fruit in relation to 2013.
We get what we call sun heat degree days. So the valley sits in the fog in the summertime till about 9 o'clock. The sun's up here at 5:30. And so we have probably 5 more hours of sun heat degree days, gentle sunlight that just gets the phenolics going in the right place. And it just really, really creates a nice, is it off or what?
I think we're still on.
No,
You're on.
you're good. I can hear you.
It just ripens the fruit just to a nice moderate level. And we don't, again, like Andy explained later, we don't have the high heat. We don't have the cool mornings. It's just a nice, if our average temperature all day long is 80 degrees, that just really, really ripens the fruit. And our roots, you mentioned earlier, Martin, you probably remember what we said. Our roots are down at least 25 feet, which is absolutely unheard of in the valley floor. Our soil retains the moisture. It's called the affinity of the water to retain in the soil. And these plants want to keep growing, and we've got to keep cutting them back. So we do a lot of leaf pulling. We do a lot of, things that just people don't even think about to keep it from being red, from being green peppery tastes. And we just want them to grow naturally, and we're a dry farm, so we don't irrigate. Even in the short period of time of, like this year, we've only had, well, as of last, we're about 27 inches of rain. That's not much for us. Last year we had 96 inches.
You had 96 inches of rain at this point in time last year?
Yes. Yep.
Holy smoke. And now you have 27?
Yeah, and our average is 60. So last year was phenomenal. This year it's borderline, but even at that, our grapes are just growing. They're growing faster than what we can keep up with. I mean, people say, well, what are you doing out in the vineyard? Well, who else is going to do what we're doing? And it's just hard. I've got a dedicated, well, two of my guys have been with me for 40 years, and God bless them. They're going to work tomorrow. And because we know it's going to rain Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. And they're willing to just be part of helping. They get it. And there's not a lot of individual farm workers that get it like my guys do.
No,
and then they've got.
You're absolutely right. And I think, and you two correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things that I'm always impressed with your wines, specifically the Cabernet, is the staying power. And part of it, I believe, is the mountain fruit. But the other day, or a couple of weeks ago, Denise and I had a 2004. Okay,
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that little bad boy has been laying down for 16 years. And I'm not kidding you. You could sit that next to a 2013, 2014, 2015. There was no color variance. When you think about a 16-year-old wine, it should be showing some lighter colors at the edges, maybe some brickish red and some lighter hues. The color had not fallen out at all. The intensity of the bouquet was spectacular. The wine was wonderful, and we had pretty good gourmet grass-fed cheeseburgers with it. But I'm curious, is there anything that from either of you is, here's a can't miss pairing combination with the Cabernet and what food you have to have?
Oh my.
Okay, well, there's a lot of things you can do. Of course, obviously, the mind calls up steak. I prefer leaner, more marbled cuts. So I'm a filet mignon person. So my two favorite preps would either be steak au poivre, which if you've never made it before, is not as difficult as it seems or sounds. If you Google steak au poivre, Good Eats, Alton Brown has an amazing preparation. Don't be afraid. You just be careful, drain the fat before you ignite the brandy or you'll set your ceiling on fire. But the other thing is just a simple steak preparation. I make my own lemon pepper seasoning every winter or spring as lemons come fresh. And it's a great multi-purpose seasoning. I dehydrate lemons, I smoke onions, and I smoke garlic. Then
That's weird. I do the same thing.
Yeah, like everyone else does, like one does. And that's a great then you pulse that in the blender with some black pepper, and it's a great multi-purpose seasoning, whether it be chicken, fish. It's great on salmon. It's great on beef.
That sounds that is literally making my mouth water. Smoked garlic sounds amazing. I'll tell you, we've had a couple of questions.
Martin,
go ahead,
Martin. Real quickly on the 2004. That's kind of funny you brought that up because we've recently started featuring a library wine for a month or two, and our current featured wine of the month, or it's probably going to be a couple of months or a quarter, I'm not sure yet, this is our first time doing it, is our 2004 Cabernet, and that is available on our website right now. We have about 15 cases of it still available. And
yeah, I would hide that.
Well, I've had it now for many, many years, and we are one of the few wineries that can, hi, would you like a 95 Schweiger? We've got it.
Right.
94,
Well,
and then
one of the things you have, and Fred, you're precisely right. It's someone's showing. Who is that?
Put in the camera. It's Carrie and her sisters.
Oh, here's a picture. You probably can't see it, but there's a picture of Fred, you and three young ladies in your tasting room.
That's a good thing.
It's all, Sally, it's all the work. So yeah, that the autofocus on, but they're sitting there in your beautiful tasting room right there. But I would like you both to talk about another bottle I have. Well, just the whole concept behind the dedication. And this is, and I'm gonna, yes, we've got the 2013 on the Cellar Angels website, and you guys all know what it does. You buy wine, proceeds go to charity. You help the small family production wineries like the Schweigers. It's all about sharing great wine. But go to the Schweiger website because their portfolio is spectacular. And they make some things that you would not find elsewhere. And as you've heard in the last segment with regards to how special the elevation is, and I think Andy has a special offer, but definitely buy wine from us, buy wine from them. And as you're doing that, learn a little bit about the dedication. So tell me the origin of that and why it's special.
Well, so, so let's see. One of those first wines that I messed up at somebody else's place would be the Chateau Saint Jean Cinq Cépage that got 100 points. So if that's messing up, I guess I've got a pretty poor track record of messing up. But what got my foot in the door to get that job was I also got to be a cellar worker at Joseph Phelps for 2 years, which is well known for their insignia. And I eventually left Chateau Saint Jean for Cane Cellars. So I really developed a knack for blending. And our first vintage here at Schweiger under our own label, Dad pretty much told me, look, I know I grow great grapes. You don't need to do any of that Mickey Mouse blending and do with the other wineries, just 100% Cab and 100% Merlot. Now, over time, I started doing bench trials and showed Dad, look what we can do if we just do 1% or 2% Merlot in our Cabernets. The 2013 we're enjoying today is actually 3% Merlot. And I eventually convinced him that let's take this all the way. And so we tea-budded some of our Merlot over to Cabernet Franc and Malbec and created our first Bordeaux blend. And we called it Dedication because that first vintage I dedicated to the 4 most influential men in my life, my 2 grandfathers, my dad, and my son.
Who was born in the year of 2000.
Which was the first vintage of Dedication. So the fun of that along the way is, so now suddenly we've gone from just Chardonnay, Cabernet, and just a little bit Merlot, adding Cabernet Franc and Malbec to the portfolio. We also had added Petit Syrah along the way. And so not only do we do Dedication as a blend, but by 2009, the Franc and Malbec varietals had started to stand on their own enough that they didn't have to be blending components anymore. They could be their own single varietal components. So in 2009, we bottled our first Cabernet Franc and Malbec separately as varietals. We changed things up. The label was red instead of cream colored. And those are club exclusives. So wine club members get first crack at that. Sometimes after it goes out to the wine club, it's sold out. And that's one thing that's unique about our wine club. Some wine clubs are, we got to move this wine, let's ship it out to the wine club. We're actually creating and curating their order for them and putting in this stuff we make just for them, but it's also completely customizable. Before we do a shipment, the club members have about 2 weeks to log on to their account and say, that's great, but I don't want my shipment of Chardonnay, Cabernet, Merlot, Port Dedication. I want 6 bottles of Dedication in my shipment. Done.
So, Fred, I find it interesting that you've given Andy tens of thousands of bits of advice over the years, but he remembers verbatim not to Mickey Mouse any of that blending stuff quote that you said 30 some odd years ago.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, but we only had 2 varieties, and we wanted to be, if you're growing good fruit, why are we doing this with a recipe? But he's proved to be doing very well. And he's got a great palate, and he knows how to put this stuff together much better than I do.
Well, and the emphasis is it's not a recipe. It changes every year.
Yeah, of course.
It's a process of the fun thing about blending is it is a lot like a marriage. 2 people who are not quite complete without each other together are greater than the sum of their parts. We will sometimes have a Merlot that has a hollow mid palate. We'll have a Cabernet that's a little too tannic in the mid palate, and we can start to bring these together. And so, hey, the rock star lots that we have, they're solid. Those definitely are going into the varietal programs. And then we can take these other wines and bring them together and create something that's better than the sum of all of its parts.
No, I
That's
think
more
it's
layered.
yeah.
More layered. It's more
We talked. Go ahead.
yeah, it's more layered, it's more intricate, but I also like to emphasize it's not a reserve. And you mentioned earlier about the pressure of having our name on it. And I don't, my answer would be a little different than my dad's. It's not necessarily pressure, but it sets a higher bar than I would feel working at somebody else's winery. To that end, sometimes people see the pretty label on dedication and say, oh, is that a reserve? And to me, reserve is a four-letter word. Dedication is a different concept in winemaking, because when I worked at larger corporate wineries, the marketing department would tell you how many cases of reserve you had to make, how many cases of blend you had to make, and you had to fulfill this quota. And quite frankly, sometimes to meet those quotas, the regular cuvee was nowhere near as good as it could have been if you made half as much reserve. So sometimes, well, first off, there's no legal definition of what reserve is.
No, it's
but reserve is often made at the expense of the rest of their releases.
Well, and I think the marriage analogy is good. I also use, oftentimes we talked about music earlier, specifically saxophone. Blends are a little bit like music, improvisational type of stuff. Certainly orchestras, when the whole orchestra is playing and it's perfect harmony, it's fantastic. Similarly, in cooking and things of that nature, you might need a little bit of something to just elevate something. And I think that's what blending affords you, and especially it affords you this when you have the luxury and basically the benefit of such wonderful fruit that you've crafted over the last 40 years. So Andy, I think you mentioned that you wanted to give anybody a special offer, and I'll let you explain that.
So you mentioned the 2004 Cabernet earlier, and we talked about some of those other varietals. Obviously 13 Cabernet in dedication. You guys can get the Cellar Angels website. So what I thought I would do is, we have a coupon code, Angels, on our website right now, and I think it's good through tomorrow evening, and that will give you $10 flat rate shipping on 6 bottles or more anywhere in the continental United States except for Utah. And I think that's kind of a fun opportunity. So go to schweigervineyards.com and you can create your own mix match 6-pack and try some of these fun wines, including older wines like the 04 Cabernet is the library wine that's being featured right now. We're about to release our Sauvignon Blanc, our 2019 Sauvignon Blanc next week. That's been sold out for about 6 or 7 months. So that's our spring, summer wine that goes very quickly. And the other thing I want to throw out there, you were talking about what makes Mountain unique. I'm not going to go into the weeds right now, but if you go to YouTube and you use Schweiger and as your search term, so you go to land on our YouTube page, in all this self-isolation, shelter in place, I've started a whole series that we're calling Schweiger Live, and look for the snapshot of me holding 2 purple balloons. And I go down the rabbit hole of tannins and phenols and oak for about 45 minutes. And so I think if you want to learn more about mountain fruit, about what oak does with wines, that'd be a fun place to go to.
I have a special guest who would like to say hello and goodbye. But before, hello.
Hi, gentlemen.
Hey there.
Hi, Denise. I can't.
Yes.
We can barely
Hi, Fred.
Hi, Denise. Good. I can hear your voice in the background, and it's been a pleasure to be part of what you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And we want to humbly thank everyone that attended tonight. And I know we've had a bunch of texts going on through all of this. But you two, as always, are par excellence. And the wine speaks for itself. We couldn't be more enamored with what you're doing. And Fred, I know it's been a labor of love for 45 plus years. And every single time we do come up to the property, it is the experience of a lifetime. And we hope everybody goes up there. We'll get through this. We always do a resilient species, and we're going to get through it with the finest of wines and the nicest of people. And that's the two of you. So thank you so much for allowing us this intrusion. And you guys be good, be healthy, be safe. And we hope to see you soon.
You as well. God bless you guys and all the work you do with Cellar Angels.
Oh, thank you so much. God bless you as well. Cheers. Be good.
Thank you.
Hey, cheers.